Good morning everyone. Today in this video we will fight against the atmospheric of our world around us, as we do in every video of this channel. And today we will try to answer a question that every regime in the world, in every historical period, even nowadays, and also in the future will have to face. And we'll have to answer this question. The question is, who will work on that? On that means what? So it means all administration, so it means government itself, its servants, its oppression apparatus, educational apparatus. For me, education very often is a part of oppression apparatus because I'm more for, of course, the personal liberty and freedom, and also all of the things that are needed to make the country and the city running. So this question is that who will work on it all? It's a lot. A lot of work is needed to keep the things running, and each regime has to answer this question. Of course, there is always a way of getting some people and turn them into slaves and force them to work, as it was in history, and still it exists with some communities in Southeast Asia, Africa, and so on and so on. But in general, now we have different types of I wouldn't call it slavery. It's a sort of exploitation by companies or simply other administrative apparatus of oppression. But okay, let's start from the beginning. So one can just, thanks to the war effort, capture some people and turn them into slaves. This is actually the method that was used from the very early times. Like one of the most efficient systems were created by Assyrians, later Romans, and so on and so on. Of course, Urartu state that existed on modern Caucasus and interacted with countries of Mesopotamia in the first millennium before Christ. Very interesting. Recently, in recent decades, described another civilization of this very interesting region of the world, region of Fertile Crescent and surroundings. So this is one way. Second way is to make people think that they work for themselves. Partially they do, because they also earn for life, and that they also work for the others to keep the country running, that their work is a patriotic duty, religious duty, or any other duty. Okay, it works till some extent for many generations. History shows it works, but recently the problems appeared in recent decades that many Western countries, just to keep the population silent after Second World War and more calm and more obedient, introduced the model of so-called welfare state. That in this model, in general, state offers protection of people who have some problems, disabilities, some other limitations, or simply do not want to work. They are given some resources just to live and to conduct their basic activities still without working and creating the goods they use for their life. How the welfare state ends? Simply, very quickly it happens that there is not enough people who are willing to work on that and create for everybody, also for those who do not work, the goods that are needed for the everyday life for all of the inhabitants of some country, region, whatever. So another step that Western countries did, because in the half of 1960 they started to introduce this welfare state model of the 20th century. So they started to import labor force from poorer countries, like countries Africa, Asia, Middle East, in Germany, Turkey. France was importing people from former colonies, Africa, Indochina, and whatever. So for 1-2 generations, these people were working once better, once worse, and they were delivering the needed goods for the entire population. But they also got spoiled because they got privileges with time, their kids got privileges, and they join the lazy group of population. So that's why the extension of European Union for the Eastern countries in 2004 happened, because another type of labor force less problematic, because also in vast majority white and sharing similar values to the Western countries populations joined, and for 10-15 years it was enough people to work on entire structure like European Union. But we know that our world, our planet is limited, so you cannot extend all the time. So now there is a problem, because still we face the same question: who will work on that? Administration grew, corporations grew, number of offices grew, and these people do not produce the products. This is the main point they use for their everyday life, and they also do not very often clean after themselves. So for basic works there are still huge shortages with labor force in these countries, larger and larger with time. So there is a problem that needs to be solved. So what leftist governments do if they have problem they cannot solve? They introduce terror, like we, of course, but first they need to find a reason to introduce terror. So last 2 years, micro friend from China was a very good excuse to just make an attempt to introduce terror. It works better in some countries, it works worse in some countries, and also terrorize population. Some people think, because if population gets degraded, lazy, so elites of this population, political economic elites, because they are not political and cultural elite, because to be cultural elite you need to create something and you need to put some effort, so you need to work on yourself. They don't want. So also these political business elites, they became degraded because they didn't have to put much effort having welfare state model, social model. They didn't have to put much effort to keep the population silent, so they also got degraded and disconnected with reality. That's why their idea to solve, in quotation, the problems they have is like controlling everybody by electronics, by other chips and so on, or maybe reduce the population, or maybe introduce the terror, or maybe mix all populations, make great interracial, interethnic mega mix, and maybe everybody will be lost and will come to great government asking for help. Completely disconnected ideas that will never work, because they cannot, because they are against the laws of nature, physics, and against the human nature. But these people ignore everything, because, as I said, for many years they didn't have to put any intellectual effort to keep the power since the mid of 1960s, because welfare state was fixing the job better or worse for them, and the situation was peaceful. Now this model, of course, stopped working. On the historical scale, such models, if you cannot import more and more labor force because the sources are also limited, these models on a historical time scale, they didn't last long. And now we are experiencing this, especially Western European welfare state model, to come to its end, bloody and sad end. Of course, another stupid idea is this elite business political business elite can just figure out is pseudo green energy, just to give some of your colleagues who have companies producing these solar batteries and other crap that doesn't work, and it's not environmental friendly, just to give them some money and later share this money with them. It will also not work. So we see that these people now have real problems, because they also stuffed, if you introduce welfare state, you have to export the production of some goods and basic jobs to other countries, or to give them to newcomers. So the older layers of population, or the native population, in majority of cases sits in the useless offices or in the corporations. In these corporations, and offices, they are like passengers. They only travel through life, and they only sit in their offices and never deliver anything, because they are not supposed to deliver, but they are supposed to just support their governments when it's needed, and just be someone to go to the streets and suppress the political opponents in the name of freedom, tolerance, and other shitty stuff through ages the same. So they are the guardians of power, but guardians of power do not work because they are simply, their function is to protect the government and support the government with their mouths and screaming on the streets. So someone needs to work on it. So we see how many parasites of power these political business elites of modern Western European countries, how many of them we have. And the old question I mentioned so many times in this movie, who will work on that, knocks to the door of the elites. And now we see they are really in big trouble, especially that now energetic and food crisis are also knocking to the door after artificial crisis with small Chinese friend. So I don't see bright future for these regions of the world that applied the model of welfare state, and they were trying to keep it running for many years, because all resources of cheap labor force and also fossil fuels and other resources are limited, and all products one needs for daily life one should be able, I mean the society and state, to produce on its own. Because if you want to live on someone else's cost, very quickly it will stop working. And this is another lesson of life the Western nations will have to take. Very painful lesson. And one needs to also mention the quotation of one of the famous Polish politicians from the 16th century, very great political figure, magnate, the Chancellor of Polish Crown, and very good soldier, Jan Zamoyski, who said, "The republics are as good as the education of the youth." Exactly. And in welfare state there is no education, there is only spoiling and making people more glossy. That's why these republics, it applies also to other states, regardless of their political system, will not be good. They will collapse. All the best. I wish you a nice day. And if you think about any political system or any system or any organization in the world, first, before one starts organizing it, one should ask a question to him or herself, who will work on that? And if you know the answer for this question, one can start working on the venture. Take care, bye.